Tallman. Good morning, everybody. I'm State Representative Stephen Bloom from Cumberland County, here with my colleague Dan Moul and other colleagues who have joined me here on the stage, who we'll be introducing later. And I want to thank everybody, first of all, for being here this morning. We're now in day 111 without a state budget in effect in Pennsylvania. Our school children and our vulnerable citizens who depend on human services are hurting. What's particularly troubling about this is that there's approximately $6.6 billion of tax revenue that's come into the general fund since the end of June of this year. These are tax dollars that are sitting there in the Treasury, but they're locked up, and Governor Tom Wolf holds the key. As everyone in this room knows, I believe, and as many folks know, Governor Wolf vetoed both the full budget and the emergency funding bill that we passed. And although, of course, we still are in the process of negotiating with the governor, we don't need to be doing it while we're holding our human service agencies and school districts and school children as hostages. In the budgets and in the emergency funding measures that the governor vetoed, there were 401 spending line items. Of those 401, 274 were funded at or above the amounts the governor had requested. Yet each day this crisis deepens. Children are losing education, workers are losing jobs, and people in need are losing access to help. These are innocent bystanders who are getting swept away in the flood of budget politics, and today we stand here in an attempt to throw them the lifelines that they need. Today, we're respectfully challenging the governor to unlock the funding that everyone agrees should be released. Everyone agrees on the amounts. These are non-controversial items. These are funding lines that no one disputes. They're funded at the amount that the governor agreed to, that we have put forth, that the agencies requested in many cases, and yet they're being tied up. So today we're challenging the governor to support our effort to release these funding lifelines to these individuals who are desperately in need of human services, and our school kids who are in need of the supplies and the support that they desperately need to complete their educations. And at this time, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dan Moul, to describe a little bit more in detail what are the bills in this emergency funding lifelines budget package. Dan?
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Moul, the 91st Legislative District in Adams County. Also joining Steve and I today, Representative Parker, Representative Ward, Representative James, Zimmerman, Schemmel, Santora, Greiner, Miller, Dush, Rapp, Tallman, and our whip, Brian Cutler. So there is quite a bit of support behind us to get our idea moving forward. And while the state budget stalemate moves towards its 5th month, many of our schools and human service agencies are feeling the pain and are under threat of closing their doors. I represent the Gettysburg area, where one of our shelters holds as many as 30 victims of domestic violence, mostly women and children. The operator of that particular shelter informed me that he would likely need to shut down operations this month if state funding did not come through and enable him to continue operating. Now imagine the courage it must take for these victims to come forward and ask for help. How difficult it must be to look these desperate people in the eyes, many of them mothers and children, and tell them that you can't help them. That is the threat facing many of our citizens in the communities all across our Commonwealth today. For victims of domestic violence, these shelters provide a lifeline, and that is what we are trying to do with this legislation we are announcing today. Many of my constituents are concerned about the budget stalemate and the impact it would have on our school budgets and the services for our poor and elderly citizens. because our school children and our most vulnerable citizens should not be held hostage during the budget impasse, we are proposing legislation that targets critical needs throughout the Commonwealth and ensures that our most vulnerable citizens receive the services they require and deserve. Specifically, our legislation would provide $9.6 million for rape crisis programs, $355 million for higher education assistance grants, $2.6 million for cancer screening services, $2 million for farmers market food coupons for low-income elderly Pennsylvanians, $1.6 million for agriculture research, about half of which would go toward the diagnosis and containment of the avian flu, and $561 million for county child welfare services. Representative Bloom is also sponsoring legislation to release $457 million in Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, $625 million in Title I funds under Federal Elementary and Secondary Education Act, $549 million in state funding to reimburse school districts for pupil transportation costs, $16.9 million for domestic violence programs, $26.8 million for the acquisition of textbooks, materials, and equipment for non-public schools, and $1.6 million to fund the services for children with special needs. These funding levels may sound familiar, and they are. They are the agreed-to amounts provided in the budget package and the subsequent emergency funding proposal, both vetoed by our governor. It is our hope that providing these line items as individual bills, this funding will stand a better chance of reaching those who truly need it. Representative Bloom, anything to follow up?
The only other comment I would add before we take questions is just to reemphasize that these are all funding line items for a complete year of funding for these different needs, these human services and educational needs. And they're all amounts that everyone at the table has previously agreed on. These are amounts where the governor requested a certain amount of funding. We provided that amount or even a higher amount in the budgets that we passed, both the full budget and the emergency funding budget. And yet the governor chose to veto those line items, even though everyone agreed. Our hope is that we can stop disagreeing about items that we agree on, and we can begin to agree on the things that aren't controversial so that these innocent bystanders can be receiving the help that they need, and that we can move these fiscal hostages back to safety and not have this situation where, again, innocent people are being hurt because some folks at the negotiating table aren't willing to even agree on things that we've all agreed on previously. So Dan.
Just one more quick thing. I wanted to make note that we've been joined by Representative Delosier and Representative Keller. But these bills were run as individual line item veto override bills, where we needed 16 from the other party to help us get this job done, to move this money to the neediest and poorest people of our community. We received no help. In other words, other people did work for the governor that he should have done himself, and this is our way of making sure that these bills, this legislation, one at a time, lands on his desk so the governor can make that decision for himself.
Any questions, Chris?
What makes you think you're going to have any more luck with this route than you did with any of the other?
It is a good question. And these, again, are items of funding for essential human services and educational needs that everyone agrees on. 4 months have passed. People are getting desperate. People are being hurt. It seems to me at this point it's apparent that not only should Republicans support this effort, but Democrats should as well, and the governor should sign these bills. They are essentially, when you look at them as percentages of the whole budget, we're talking about a budget that, depending on what number you use, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 billion to $34 billion. Many of these line items are in the neighborhood of $9, $10 million, just a fraction of a percent of the entire budget. Trivial in the scheme of what the entire budget is, but vitally important, life-saving even for those who receive them. I'm simply urging and challenging and encouraging the governor to think very long and hard about who these people are, the amount of help they need, and when these bills hit his desk, we're hoping that he'll realize this is an opportunity to help some people in need, and they don't need to be held as fiscal hostages, and that the amounts in question are so small in consequence to the whole budget, but so vitally important to these people in need.
I'll add something to that just very quickly. I was told, as many of us were, when this governor was running for office, that he's a governor that cares. He cares about the people. This will be his opportunity to show that he cares about the neediest people of our communities. I don't believe the governor will take this lightly if it lands in front of him, that he is the one that has to make the decision to either help these people or let these people go without. I really don't think this governor will make that choice, but we are trying every avenue that's available to us. This is just the next avenue that we're going to try to get this money moving to the people that do not have a dog in this fight. They are strictly service organizations, nonprofit, out there performing a service to our community for very little bit of money, trying to help people. We have no business holding them hostage over a fight in this budget, and neither should the governor. Yes, ma'am.
Is House Republican leadership going to bring this up for a floor vote?
We have been working very closely with the Appropriations Committee and the chair, and they actually helped us put all this together. We've been working through them, so I can't stand here today and say I guarantee you that it's going to happen, but I would think that with some members of leadership here today that it would stand a good chance of seeing a House floor vote.
Should the introduction of this package be taken as maybe a recognition on your part that there's a full budget can't be agreed to in the near future?
I mean, we're here on day 111 without a budget. Times are getting desperate for the agencies and the schools that depend on this funding and the kids who depend on this funding. It's a recognition that we need to do something to get the money out to them quickly. Dan and I are rank and file members. We don't have control over whether we reach an agreement with the governor, but this is something we can do right now today to get money moving to people who are, again, innocent bystanders. They're not in this fight. They need help. We can do this quickly, efficiently, get it to the governor's desk. He can sign it, take these issues off the table so that these people can get the funding that they truly do deserve.
I can assure you that with these bills in particular, and we all work well, both sides of the aisle. We have friends on each side of the aisle, and they're getting real tired of voting no to help their service organizations in their communities, and they're tired of putting up no votes for no good reason. So don't be surprised if when these do come to the House floor, you see quite a few Democrats jumping on with these.
Matt?
There's been talk that, since the state workers are being paid throughout this impasse, that there's not that much pressure on the legislature and the governor to do something about the budget. If this passes, it's just one less pressure point, in a way, to get something done.
It's a good question, Matt. To say that it's okay, and I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but to say that it's okay to use victims of domestic violence, victims of rape, children with special needs, children with disabilities as pressure points to get a budget deal done, that speaks to something I think we're trying to address today by bypassing the politics, bypassing the governor's insistence on vetoing everything, getting right to the core of the matter, putting before the governor an opportunity to help those in need who aren't part of this fight. Innocent bystanders, people who are getting hurt by the governor's insistence on all or nothing budgets. Here's an opportunity to help the people who desperately need it, get the fight off the table for them, restore their funding, allow them to move forward in their lives, and not be tied up in the political negotiations in Harrisburg.
What's the total amount of funding in the two bills?
I don't have the total amount. I can give you, Christian, I can give you figures for all the bills, each of the individual bills, but we're talking somewhere on the order of probably a couple $2 billion when you add them all up. Many of these are very small in the scheme of the whole budget. I know there's some that are on the order of $9 million out of a 30-some billion dollar budget. Others are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of it's federal money, too. Some of it's federal funding that's simply sitting there, not being released because it's caught up in the budget stalemate. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.